the creativity side, I think, of those with ADD and ADHD is what really drives. This is what probably makes you a good writer, is the creativity side of it, because you have so many ideas. If you can get them down, and you can just go. So the creativity side for her will just empty and spill out of her in those moments.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting On the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people around the world watching us, they say we know where Canada is, we know where British Columbia is, we know this big town in British Columbia called Vancouver, but where is Prince George? Well, we are about 500 miles north of Vancouver, and that, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers, that puts us in the center of British Columbia, north, south, east, west. So British Columbia, big province, lots of, here in northern British Columbia, lots of forest, lots of nature. Within 50 miles of our town, about 85,000 people in Prince George. In 50 miles, we have about 100 lakes. It's nature's paradise. We have black bears, we have grizzlies, we have caribou, we have deer, we have foxes, you name it, we have it. It's man living in harmony with nature, a beautiful, beautiful place. So today a special guest, his name is Daniel Tribby, and Daniel is a healthcare provider, award-winning author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a business mentor. He has a very, very interesting background, especially in the medical profession. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a bit about your involvement with healthcare.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to go about describing that is kind of talk about where I came from in healthcare, which was as a provider. As a provider, I worked in the physical rehabilitation, or physio, for those of you who are international. And I noticed that the world of healthcare was taking on more of a quantity versus quality type of persona, especially here in the U.S. And that led me to want to do something different, to disrupt a little bit. So as my career has gone on, I've ventured in all things from being the provider to being in the sales world inside of the medical healthcare sales and equipment and plates and screws and all of that, to owning my own practice, to now consulting other people on how to build a successful practice business-wise, but also that serves people. So I want to disrupt this idea or this feeling that healthcare is always transactional. Right? Here in the U.S., as business owners, we should be able to offer something that's transformational to our consumer base. So that's kind of my stick in the game, is to help these entrepreneurs in healthcare, private healthcare systems, really learn how to build a more successful business so they can live the life that they want to, and they can treat the patients the way that they were taught to, and the patients get the actual experience that they deserve. So in a 30,000 foot view, that's what I do.
Okay, so then here in Canada, we have a healthcare system, not very different in terms of doing what for their client base, but we have a shortage of docs. Our system is a universal healthcare, which means that everybody gets the same, and that is good, and that has positives about it and negatives about it. So the problem that we have now in healthcare, there are not enough docs, not enough nurses, not enough people to staff operating rooms and surgeons and all the infrastructure around them. And then at the same time, what we see, we have people going to the healthcare centers that are free of charge, and for things that are relatively minor, and then docs are trying to usually treat illnesses or people get hurt or need something relatively minor or subscriptions, but there is usually a lineup of people, and the docs only have so much time to spend on each one of those individuals. Where ideally, and for myself, I'm very proactive in being proactive in staying fit and healthy. I'm approaching 84 years old, or I call it 84 years young, and I'm still working very hard. I have 10 different companies. I write books, and I'm a speaker, as you are, a demand speaker, and then I go to the gym, and I eat healthy, and I'm being very proactive. I believe in longevity and the quality of life. So. Yeah. And I wrote a book about that, actually, and I'll show you a picture of the book, Living Young, Dying Old, and that's a picture of me, actually. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
Love it.
At 84, and I'm getting ready for the Arnold's in 2025. I qualified for it just before COVID, and then COVID came, and so I'm training again for 2025 to compete. By then, I'm 85, and I will win. I will be successful. I already told Arnold, I'll be back.
There you go. No puns intended, right?
No
puns. I think that's great. I mean, a lot of people, don't live that life. They don't develop those habits. They count on the healthcare system to save them, which in that world is now sick care. Right, so take care of my bumps, my bruises, my sickness, my diabetes, my heart, my liver, my kidneys, my whatever, right? And when you could have been eating better, exercising, doing all the things that you should have been doing on a regular basis, that would allow you to have more of the longevity that you talked about versus relying
into quality of life. Yep. The age is just a number. Correct me if I'm wrong. Most people that are in the last decade of their lives, the last 10 years, are suffering from some illnesses. It's not a pleasurable experience a lot of times in Canada. I presume it is the same in the United States. So, but I believe in is quality of life. And what you do then, at least in my world, is be proactive. In terms of diet, in terms of the obvious, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't use drugs, and I am going to the gym, stay healthy, stay fit, and then at the same time be proactive in terms of, I work with doctors that are not only medical doctors, but also medical providers that are proactive in terms of making sure that I get the right vitamins and all the other things, that I understand what is happening inside of my body, so I can be very, very proactive, and I build a relationship with them.
Sure. I think a lot of times what happens, especially here in the U.S., is that if you want that type of treatment, you're going to have to pay for it, right? Correct. Versus the treatment that is paid for by the insurance companies here, right? So insurance companies will pay for your yearly physical, right? So you go see the doctor once a year, they do the blood work, do all the tests, but then they tell you, all right, well, here's some medicine you need to take to fix this problem, or you might need to lose a few pounds, or here's some blood pressure pills, or something like that. Make adjustments to your diet, but they don't. It's not a regular prevention. If I wanted to go get a full body scan or a DEXA scan or anything that involved complete health and complete longevity, I'm gonna have to pay out of pocket for that. And a lot of what's taught here is use your insurance company and what they'll pay for, right? Not what's actually best for you, but what will your insurance company pay for? Correct. And I think that's the problem. Especially my world was in orthopedics, so everything that was bone, muscle, joint, spine. But our practice was specialty of stem cell medicine and regenerative properties for all of those different body parts. So we weren't billing insurance. We weren't giving people narcotic pain medications or steroids or surgical intervention. we were using bone marrow from their own bodies and concentrating that and injecting it into bad joint surfaces or disc issues, things like that, where majority of people get treated with either medicines or surgery, and they're not any better for the long term. And then if you had let's say you got bad back or bad knees in your 40s or 50s, what's going to happen to you when you have surgery at 70 or 80? Like, you just don't, like you mentioned, quality of life is so important. So for us, it was really important to give people a non-surgical way of healing that's backed by science. But it is cash-based. So you do have to pay for it because it's not covered by insurances.
So I suggest to you, from my experience, Daniel, it's probably the best investment that I can make in paying for that service. Because it helps me in terms of not only in my fitness, but it gives me quality of life. And if I do look at the cost of some of the other things, maybe smoking, drinking, and all the other kind of stuff, then it is a relatively small investment, especially when you build the relationships.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. And those things, that investment is hard to teach the average person in the United States to take advantage of. But, and this is the thing that drives me crazy a lot of the times, is that people want to find the thing or the treatment that their insurance pays for. But if their dog got sick and had cancer and it was going to cost $5,000 for them to do that, they'd find the money, right? If their car was broken down and it wasn't going to be covered by insurance, they would find the money, right? So it's, you one way or another, you're going to find the money, and one way or another, you are going to have the problem. So you can either invest in your health now, or you're going to be paying to fix it later.
Hence, this is the reason that I wrote the book. It's my fourth book, and I'm working on the fifth one and the sixth one. But I know you're an author as well. So so this is the book I wrote, and I put a picture of me on the front at 83. And that's how I look now, being nearly 84. And there is no reason that there is nothing magic about it. It's quality of life and going to the gym and enjoying going to the gym, and then being proactive. My wife, myself, do every 2 years we get a full body MRI. The government doesn't pay for that. We pay for it just to understand ourselves. And then actually, I just came back from, I should pull it off, once a week here. That wasn't put there for your benefit. I had an appointment there at a half an hour ago, is get my weekly injection of vitamins. And again, that's all stuff that one of the things that I do. But
the IV infusion that you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to do those in my office as well. They hang the bag and then run the, we do those.
Yeah. And that's, again, is preemptive, preventive, and the combination of all of it, it is probably one of the best investments I made. And then I have so many other people, they say, well, like I go to the gym and this is how I look. And as I said, I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. Not everybody has to do that, but stay fit. At least walk even half an hour a day. And then some people say, I'm too old, and I'm too this, and I'm too that, and the other thing. Or like
one day you're going to wish you weren't.
Exactly. And saying that I still work. I'm an entrepreneur. I still write books. I have 10 different. I'm not eager to brag about my success, but I say I'm very active. I get up 5:30 in the mornings. I always make my bed. I always think I'm late, and I love every day. To me is I'm lucky to be alive and to live in a country where we are, that is in North America compared to the rest of the world. We are the luckiest people in the world. But fitness and health, critically important to the whole you as a person.
Right. No, I agree with that. I think it's also, you mentioned the best investment you've given to yourself, and I think the investments in yourself go far beyond just what I ingest through my mouth and the output that I have exercise wise. I think some of the most important things too is what I'm feeding my mind as well. So much like you, I exercise regularly. I used to go to the gym a lot. I don't go to the gym anymore. I have kettlebells, and so I use those outside of my garage. So I'm outside in 85, 90-degree Florida weather 3-4 days a week, swinging heavy weights around and just staying more functional, more active. I've also got a house full of two-legged wild people here too, so they keep us busy and on our toes. But I think that what's missing for a lot of people too, and I work with a lot of business owners, and it's true, and you know this from being a business owner as well, is that if I'm not feeding my mind, if I'm not growing as a person, then it's impossible for me to grow a business also. So when we talk about investing in myself, it's investing more than just in my physical nature, but it's investing more in how I think, right? And what are the things that I need to do for this so that I can put a better quality me out into the world?
Absolutely, Daniel. Now, another thing I should mention to you, I was not born here. I was born in Holland in 1940. Mm-hmm. During the war years. It was tough go, and tough for our family, and saw far too much that we should not have seen. And I was affected by PTSD, and the inner child, got counseling for that, still can feel part of the war and all of those kind of things. We were liberated April the 12th, 1945 by the Canadian Army. It made such an impression on me that I always knew then I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so I tried to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, was mandatory at the time, for a little over 2 years. And then finally I left Holland with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, very little money, and the dream of going to Canada. But then I had another dream to build my own lumber mill. But I wanted to start with nothing. And I didn't have much self-confidence, and I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. So they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And saying, well, maybe send him to the mentally challenged school. My parents said, no, we're not going to do that. So they said, we'll get him a trade. So my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad worked in the lumber. He said, let's send him to a furniture factory. So they did at 13. I wanted that. I loved it. And in the evenings, I would go to the college and became a furniture maker. So then my dream was, I still was troubled by, my academic performance or the lack thereof. And all my friends went on to college and university. And then kids can be hard on each other. So I became a laborer. And so I was outside of that group, but I lived in a world of my own. I always knew I was going to be successful, not better than, but successful. And I was going to start from the ground up, and I did that. I left Holland in July of 1965, flew to Montreal, took the train across Canada to Vancouver because the trees are in British Columbia. Went through the immigration department, couldn't speak the language, and fortunately there was a German fellow, and I told him what I wanted to do. I want to build a lumber mill. So he said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north. That's where they're building sawmills and lumber, and that's where the future is. So I did. So when I came off the bus here, the Greyhound bus in July of 1965, I can still see where the bus station was, right here, 60 years later. And I had my suitcase, my 3 books, my 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But what I had lots of attitude. Even then already, I've always been, no matter how tough things were, even in my own little world, I always was positive. The other one, passion. But whatever I believe in, I give it 125%. I did that then, I still do that today. Work ethic, I work harder than anybody, even now at nearly 84. I'm usually the first one at work and the last one to leave, but I love it. And then, in addition to all of that, I write books. As you are, and I'm an in-demand keynote speaker. I'm a very good presenter, even if it was about the second or third language that I learned. English took me a while, and so that I like to do that, and I still manage companies, and I still intend to go further and think, what are we going to do 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What will it look like? and I intend to live till I'm 120.
Good for you. I love it. I love it. My bride and I have talked about 106. That's our number, 106. For whatever number that came out, it was 106. We said, all right, let's go. So
Yeah.
I'm 42. I just had a birthday a couple weeks ago. She turns 42 next week.
Happy birthday. You're about half my age.
Yep. I said, but we look at it. We're like, all right, we got 60. How many more years? 65 years or so. 64 years to go. What do we want to accomplish? What do we want to do? What is the what's the attitude that we want to take? What passions do we have? And like you said, what ethics do we want to put into it? So those three things are super. And I think that it's. I was talking to my son about this today. Is you have a choice. Right? No matter how the day goes, you have a choice. You have a choice to act one way or act another way. Right? You choose that. What somebody else does to get underneath your skin, that's their problem. But the emotions that you have, that's your problem. So you need to decide what attitude that you want to have.
Exactly.
Right? So that's such an important aspect is how we approach. What do we see? How do we look at the day? Does one thing go wrong and we assume that the rest of the day is going to go wrong? Or do we just say, that's one moment, let's move to the next moment and we're going to change this around and go from there? People always say, it's going to be one of those kind of days. And then what happens? You have that day because you decided it was going to be like that, right?
So, and that day is only one that you will never get back. So the better you make it, and like for myself, I don't tolerate negative around me. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it, and that's not part of my life.
I agree. So what was the passion for you, John? Like, what was the thing? What was the motivating passion for you inside of lumber?
Yeah, so it started with when we were liberated by the Canadian Army in April the 12th, 1945, was to go to Canada, the land of my heroes. That's what that was on my mind. Then obviously academically not being successful, and Holland is a country where your education is very much looked at in terms of what are your degrees, where did you go to college, where were you born, and all of those things are important in Holland. And I knew that at some point I was working hard already, and at some point I would get married and we would get a house and I get a job or a career, and the question would be, what's your education? And I would have to say, I have no diplomas, So so that kind of still was part of me, as I never could quite understand why. And so then I felt I had to start all over, and that's for somebody, especially in Holland. And although lots of Dutch people emigrated to the United States as well as to Canada after the Second World War, but I grew up in northeastern Holland. Most of the people in my family are within about 50 miles or less than that even, in a circle all around it. And if you would move outside of that and saying that we are in northeastern Holland and somebody's going to Amsterdam or somebody say, oh my God, we'll never see, oh my God, how could you do it? We'll never see him again. So not going to the other side of the world. So, but that's what I did. And then I wanted to prove to me that I could do it. I wanted to start with nothing. And so that means I couldn't speak the language, didn't know, so I didn't want to know anybody. And I wanted to do it on my own. And for me, there was no question about it that I would own a lumber and build a lumber mill. There was no question about that. And the reason that I did, my dad worked in a lumber mill as managed one for a larger company. My grandfather was a master carpenter, very proud of it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. So that after I was here in Prince George, starting with nothing, within a year, already, I was a cleanup man in a lumber mill. and then a lumber pilot, and then very quickly I was a superintendent of one of the larger mills here. Within 2 years, I owned a little piece of a mill all the way up in the Yukon Territory, and that's all the way right next to Alaska.
Oh.
For a guy coming from Holland, that where the difference between number and, we always say, what is the weather like in Holland? Well, the difference between winter and summer is the rain is colder in the wintertime. In Watson Lake, where I was for about 5 years, I've seen the temperature dropping to 62 below zero. And so you can imagine, I was there for about 5 years, then came back here, started my companies that is now called the Brink Group of Companies, with 3 employees and myself, and then obviously now nearly 50 years later, we have 3-4 different mills, and we are in warehousing, logistics, and distribution, and then I'm into real estate, residential, commercial, and then I'm also in a company that is into media, doing books, speaking, podcasting, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So
right.
So that's kind of has been my journey.
I love it. I lived. My mom is retired government, so I lived in Frankfurt, Germany, and in Bonn, Germany, and so I've been to Holland many times. I've done Amsterdam a few times, and I also I've seen the tulips and the windmills. So I've been to Holland many times. A beautiful, beautiful country.
Yes, no question about that. Yeah, and then you were also in Spain, right? During a period. Because you were traveling in different areas. So you were in Spain for a couple of years?
I was. I did 3 years in Frankfurt and followed by 2 in Madrid. So we were there, and then we went. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, close to like Washington D.C. area. But we had a break there. So we had 5 years in Europe, and then back to Virginia, and then back to Europe, and then finally to Atlanta. But yeah.
And then you started working in healthcare, and then you found that being a healthcare provider, like you explained earlier, in terms of, in particular, as it related to fitness, physical
therapy.
Physical therapy, and so you work for a number of companies, and that was not always satisfactory the way they were doing it, because, correct me if I'm wrong, that was still involved as not an existing facility or service that was available. It became part of the medical system, but it really did not address the issues really in earnest.
Yeah, I think that it was, I loved being a provider. I haven't treated in years now myself, but when I first came out of college and started working and started treating and started doing therapy on my patients, I loved doing that. The problem was that you were forced into a quantity type of system. Like you worked you built sawmills. I worked in a patient mill, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it's just a constant,
turn them over, right?
Yep, more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And at the end of the day, it's no matter how good of a job you did, they would come up to you and put the hand on your back and say, "Great job. How much more can you do?
Yeah.
How much more can you do? How much more can you do?" And it didn't matter that we had the highest customer service ratings in the entire company. It didn't matter that we had 120% productivity levels. It didn't matter. They wanted more, but they didn't want to give more to the employees to be part of that. Yeah. And so after a while, you just go, "Why am I doing this?" After 10 years, it's why am I doing this? Why am I here working for somebody else?
Yeah.
And just constantly leaving at the end of the day exhausted and not feeling like I can make the impact that I desire to make. So I stopped treating. That was probably 2014. So 10 years ago, maybe even 2013, I stopped treating. And I decided to go into the medical sales business. And that's where I started my first company. And And that's where I got the entrepreneurial fever that led me down the path.
So you started that company from the ground up, providing the services and they were not provided for by insurance?
No, so this one, yeah, so that one was my actual healthcare practice that I started. But my first business was a sales business. So I sold plates and screws and bone grafting and regenerative medicine stuff to other doctors. That was my first business. I did that at first, and I fell into the regenerative medicine field. The stem cell therapy stuff is really where I caught fire in that. And I had an opportunity to open my own clinic. I say I leave healthcare, I'm never going back. Right? Never say never. And
then I go back.
I got pulled back into it, and we opened a center in Orlando, Florida, in 2017, and built that from zero again. So this is my second business. Built it from zero again. Grew it to 7 figures in 3 years, majority of which was during COVID. And managed to exit that business in 2023 with a very nice multiplier. So that was my first, I guess, taste of that American dream that everybody talks about, where you start from nothing, build it, and then sell it. So that was that company was based in regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy. So we offered bone, muscle, joint, and spine treatments for people who would traditionally be given chemical medicines or surgery to fix their problems. We offer them a different treatment.
And that is precisely the important part, I believe, Daniel, is that it's relatively new, stem cell surgery and those things relating to that, and becoming more and more acceptable and recognized in both in Canada, but in particular in the United States. And that's very, very interesting.
We have patients cancel their surgeries the week of to come and try this method first, get well, and never need the surgery. Like, these are people with rotator cuff tears in their shoulder, or disc issues in their back, or meniscus issues in their knee. And we have the ability to help the body heal naturally versus cutting stuff away from it, or injecting it more, or filling it with more chemicals.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Is that because I'm a bodybuilder and competitive, and I damaged both my rotator cuffs, both of them, on probably in 2000, I think, probably more than 20 years ago. Even to the point that I talked to a surgeon friend of mine. I also have a replacement knee. It was done by a doc in Phoenix, Arizona, because they had a very, very good reputation. They replaced the knee, and it's amazing what I do with it now. It is as strong, if not stronger, than the other one. I do all the heavy-duty sports with it, and then bodybuilding. But with my rotator cuffs, I contacted him because it was starting to affect my working out. And he said to me, and he does shoulders, backs, knees. That was his specialty. He said, "John, is it bothering you?" I said, "Not really, other than I have difficulty, doing this because of the damage." So I had pictures taken of it, MRIs or scans, send it to him. He said, "It's a fair amount of damage, but if it doesn't bother you, don't do surgery." Because surgery much more complicated on rotator cuffs than on knees. So I didn't, and now all these years later, I had nothing done on it, but my shoulders are just fine now. I do all the kinds of things, and you can see it on my picture. Is that
That's good. I think a lot of people too jump the gun too soon. They have an expectation that has been created that if I take a pill or have a shot, it fixes the problem. Well, orthopedics, joint issues don't work that way. Joint issues take longer to heal. And in most cases, even if you have surgery, you're talking about the research says at least 100 days just for healing to occur from the surgery. That doesn't include getting the strength back, the motion back, the actual durability and stability of the shoulder as a whole, right? Or any joint for that matter. So there's a reason why, if you see athletes who have ACL surgeries in their knee, it takes them 6 months to a year to get back to their previous performance. But we have an expectation that what pill can I take? What shot can I get that'll just fix me? And in orthopedics, it's not like that. And a lot of people jump the gun. I have a little pain. I need to go get a shot. I need to go do something. Whereas if you did a little activity modification and some light strengthening exercises, it would probably go away within 6 to 12 weeks. So people are like, I don't want to wait that long. I need a shot, right? But the other side of the research will tell you for every shot that you get that's a steroid, you are increasing the overall damage to the cartilage surface in your joints for the long run. So it might help you now, but it's causing problems later on.
Exactly. So that became very successful, that company that you then sold. Mm-hmm. Is more and more of that now becoming active in the United States? Is that now more and more becoming understood?
Stem cell therapy wise, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think there's a little bit of an issue, just like anything else. If it's popular, then other people want to jump and ride that wave as well.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of times you have people who are doing it improperly, and those people cause problems with government regulations, and then it causes problems for all of us, right? And the majority of us have good intentions and we want to do it well, but there are some people out there who just see it as a cash cow, right? Versus what it actually does. And so in our center, we're very careful to make sure we have the right doctors who are qualified and trained to give these injections, right? We're not just hiring random people.
And that's the key, right? So making sure that they have the right certification.
Expertise, certification, and what are you using, right? There's several places that you can get stem cells from to use in your body. Our suggestion is always to use ones that come from your own body, either your fat tissue or your bone marrow. But there's a large push, and if you're familiar with Tony Robbins, he's got a book that came out a few years ago called Life Force. And he talks about stem cell therapy from donated cells from embryos or from placental tissue, right, inside of mothers who've had C-sections during birth. They can use that sac. It's called the amnion inside of the lining. So he pushes that, claiming it's stem cell therapy. Well, the FDA has a huge problem with it because there's studies on there that refute it being stem cell therapy versus what are actual stem cells, which are found in bone marrow and fat tissue, versus the ones found in amniotic tissue. So there's a little bit of a problem with that, and there's people overcharging for amniotic tissue and some of those placental stuff. So that becomes a muddy water issue in the U.S. and it causes problems.
Yeah, and causes credibility even for the stuff that genuinely has been proven to be effective, like what you are mentioning, and as done by qualified individuals that trained for this. But still, it is something very, very important, right? To look forward that is already part of it and can be part of it if you make the proper inquiries to find people that are qualified to do that.
Sure. I think anybody, if you're going to any sort of healthcare practice, regardless if it's for your skin or for your nose and throat or for your big toe or whatever, make sure that you're doing research on the doctor that you're going to see. Right? Yeah. What is their specialty? What are their reviews like? Do your research and know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and so that's what I do. Is I have a naturopathic doctor, and then I also have a medical doctor. Both of them wrote the foreword to this book, actually, Living Young and Dying Old. And then I also have a U.S. doc that was on my podcast that became contributor to, also wrote a foreword. It's Dr. Billstrom, MD. And so that to me is very, very important, to find qualified individuals with all the things that you do. Your body is extremely precious, extremely forgiving, but only to a certain extent. And then it says, okay, I cannot do any more for you, so it's up to you. And that then happens in latter part of life, in the last decade, and so on and so forth. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about with you is that you also are an author. Now, I'm an author, and I, when I went through all the things that I went through, and they said to me, hey, John, you should write a book about this. And so for about 20 years, I've been thinking about a book, and then 5-6 years ago, I said, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So this book, against all odds, took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And it's all about not how successful John is, but going through all the ups and downs and all the challenges. And so I really enjoyed writing it, but writing a book, not easy. But when you stay the course, and then and put a lot of effort into it, you wrote a book, and I'm not exactly sure you published it, and it was I'll name the book, The Unfucking of the
Private Healthcare.
Of the private healthcare. And I thought the title is interesting because it gets a lot of attention, for one.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think looking back on that, I wrote that in 2020. It took me about 4 months to write that. It was something much like you, I think I was sitting on for a while. And the question was, how do I reach more people with significant information that would really help them change the trajectory of their life and their business, right?
Yeah.
And so I just happened to be at a course, and I heard Raymond Aaron speak, and he was one of the co-authors. He's a Canadian gentleman as well. He was one of the co-authors of some of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books and a bunch of other real estate books. And I heard him speak, and he had a course that would help you learn how to write your own book. And so I took his course, and it was really good. But at the time, I was, anybody that's had the success that you and I have had, we don't just write the books, we read them too, a lot of them. And there are a lot of books out there that I think capture attention based upon strong language, right? Like the, what is it, Bishop's, it's not Bishop, it's Mark, I can't remember his last name, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, right? And then Bishop has the Unfuck Yourself, right? Those series. And then, so there's a bunch of different books like that. And I think I had gone through a string of reading them. And so I wanted to have the same kind of punch. I think you fast forward 4 years, I wish I'd have used the word disrupting instead of unfucking. But I'm gonna rewrite it. I've actually started to rewrite it because there's stuff I want to add to it. But it's so the writing process, I think, becomes such a storytelling moment, right? This is what I used to think versus this is what I found out. Therefore, now I believe this, and I'm curious to see what else is going to change as you move through this. And you find that it identifies with so many people who have probably walked the same path that you have walked, right? Or are looking for a certain type of help along the way to get to a place where they feel better about their professional and personal lives, right?
Yeah. So the other thing that happened to me is that how things can impact me, is that in 1997, I already had been here in Canada for 32 years. I already was successful in my businesses. Everybody said, oh, you're so successful and blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that way. I felt still that I had failed. But not that it preoccupied me to a big extent, but deep down, to a certain extent. I was still attitude, passion. I was still happy-go-lucky, but inside. And then one day I walked into a store here in Prince George, and it was actually January of 1997, and I picked up a book, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction. And I have no idea why I picked it up. It was written by Dr. Edward Hollowell, medical doctor, and Dr. Halliwell had written 18 books, 5 of them on distraction or ADHD. Dr. Halliwell is ADHD. He is also dyslexic, like I am. And so I read the book, and I wrote in the book, right here I wrote in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. Now I finally know who I am. January 1997. So you are my podcast number 294. So my podcast On the Brink number 203 is an interview with Dr. Halliwell. And so
great. Love it.
Can you believe that? And so I had a discussion with Dr. Halliwell, and by now the more I knew about it, the more I went through Google, and the more I got to know about it, the frequency of occurrence much higher than I initially thought it was, around 8%. I thought it'd be more like 20%. So I mentioned that to Dr. Halliwell, and he's the professional, not me. And I said to him that I believe from my experience it has been that it is probably more than, at least 20%. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. And I agree with him.
Wow.
The other thing that we said is that what I said to him, with all the things that I've been doing as being part of industry and all kinds of associations, board of directors, I've done it all of that. And I have found that a lot of the successful and the operative is successful CEOs and entrepreneurs, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, I believe that 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75%. I agree with him. And so
Wow.
then I felt I had to write a book about all of this. I did that already before. So I wrote a book about ADHD Unlocked.
Right.
And it's very internationally very popular, actually. And you can open the book anywhere, go either forward or backward, and it's all interesting. You can start it anywhere, But the book is not only for those that have ADHD, but also considering my discussions and my personal experience, that I believe ADHD is found probably in 30% of the population, and that this book is helpful for that process, but also those that are slow learners or lose interest, also for people affected by trauma. And so I wrote a book about that, and that kind of changed my life. So the things that changed my life is that, being liberated by the Canadian Army, they're making the decision to go to Canada, start from the ground up again, building a sawmill. I did that, and many more in other businesses. Then at a late age, become an author. Then the other part that I did, and I would be amiss if I did not include that, I was not a very good communicator. I was okay in my own setting, but if it was more than 3 people, I was not good at that. And outside of my circle, I was not good at communications. Then somebody took me to an organization I had never heard of. They called it Toastmasters. And I said, what is that all about? He said, oh, it's just, communication skills. I said, will they ask me questions? He said, no. You just sit there and just watch it. So halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. I said, oh, my God, I'll never go back here. I stayed there for 10 years. and became a DTM, Distinguished Toastmaster. That's the highest level of Toastmasters. And it changed my world. And then for all those people watching us from around the world, there are Toastmaster clubs here in North America in particular. This city probably has 3 clubs. I'm sure where you are Toastmaster clubs, and that probably 450,000 people are part of clubs. Also in Europe, not quite as many as here. And then probably 10 million or maybe even 20 million people over the last 40 years have been part of Toastmastering. But it's less than 1% that go to the level of DTMs, not by choice, but because I needed more of it. The longer I stayed, the more I felt it. It helped me, but it changed my ability to my communication skills, and I became an in-demand keynote speaker. And so if I combine it all, the liberation in Holland, the Canadian Army, coming to Canada, then Toastmasters in 1992, 2000, and then finding the book 1997 that showed I'm ADHD. I call it a superpower. And a lot of people say to me, how do you do all the things that you're doing? You all these companies, and you're writing the books, you do podcasting, you do this and that. How do you do it? I say ADHD. That's how.
Yeah. It's I worked with a doctor, and his take on it was that a lot of people call ADD or ADHD a dysfunction of the mind, and he said it's not a dysfunction; it's a function of the mind, and it happens relative typically to childhood stuff going on, to where you probably had a lot of emotions or feelings as a child that you were unable to express, or when you tried to express, somebody diminished them and wouldn't let you express them, or you got yelled at or something like that. And so you just thought about the feeling, you thought about how it was, and then now the feelings and the thoughts, everything just races. And so anything external that comes into your peripheral, you take it in and you have to think about it and think about it. And so it makes it difficult to get anything really done, or at least to be able to focus on a depth level. So my bride is ADD, and she's one of those ones where if there's anything, any noise or any distraction, it pulls her out, and it takes her forever to get back into what she's doing. Right, but when she's focused, she's in it. She's in, and she'll go 3-4 hours straight.
Exactly.
It just, but anything, little movement, it pulls her right out. Yeah.
So what I found, Daniel, that it's a superpower, because once you get focused, you see, with my experience in the past, the first 5 years, we were at war, or we were, Holland was under control of the dictator Adolf Hitler, and things were very, very tough and very, very difficult. We saw far much that we should not have seen. So it was a very, very difficult time. But after all of this, and by understanding the different areas and finding the book, and then the Toastmastering, it changed my life. But I've always been a good writer, and I've been good with numbers, even when I was in grade 3, although I failed it, and then grade 7, I was always a good writer and good with numbers. But the schooling system is changing, where if 30% of the population, I would say, and Dr. Halliwell agreed that between 25 and 30% of the population equal to between men and women, although the one is showing it differently than the other maybe, but are ADHD or ADD, if you wish, then it is a superpower once you know what it is, and then you use it to that ability, and it can do amazing things for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if you can find the ways to stay plugged in and focused, right, and then limit the distractions or the noises around you. Like I watch her. Her desk is here to my immediate left, and I watch her. If she's got headphones on, and everything's quiet and she can plug in, she'll go. Like I said earlier, but any little distraction, and she's brilliant. The creativity side, I think, of those with ADD and ADHD is what really drives. This is what probably makes you a good writer, is the creativity side of it, because you have so many ideas. If you can get them down, then you can just go. So the creativity side for her will just empty and spill out of her in those moments.
So what I'm going to do, Daniel, I'm going to send you copies of all my books, all 4 of them. Against All Odds, ADHD Unlocked. I wrote another one, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And then the other one is Living Young, Dying Old. So I'm going to send those to you. I'm going to sign them for you. So we'll do it next week. And then the other part is that we release our podcast fairly quickly. This one will come out tomorrow morning. We always either do it the same day or within 24 hours. I like that idea. And so for all those people watching us from around the world, do you have a contact area that they can contact you, or what's podcasting that you do?
Yeah, so I'm more active on LinkedIn as far as social media goes. So you can find me. It's just Daniel Tribby, Tribby. And if you want to find more information about me outside of social media, my website is www.danieltribbyofficial.com. So I had to do the official because there's another Daniel Tribby somewhere and he stole my URL. So I'm danieltribbyofficial.com. So you can find me there. I post links to any of my podcasts on my social media and on my website as well. So.
And then for all those people watching this podcast, if you like what we are doing, we're podcasting. I podcast On The Brink, and my contact is johnabrink.com. We have our books, and subscribe to my podcast if you like what we're doing, podcasting people from around the world, and on all kinds of issues of interest to our audience. Share it with others, like it, comment on it, and again, we thank you all for watching. And Daniel, it was a privilege. Such important topics that we are discussing. Let's make sure we stay in touch. And I will send you the 4 books. Scott will send them out probably in the next couple of days. You should have them next week.
Perfect. Thanks, John. I had a great time, man, and I appreciate all the wisdom that you're putting out in the world and all the success that you've had that others can learn from. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Daniel. Take care. Bye-bye.